When I opened the nightstand drawer in my mother's room, 3 hours after she was declared dead, I found a broken rosary and a letter from my uncle saying he would be home that same night. The smell of candles and medicine still filled the room. It was then I realized that a nightmare worse than death was just beginning. My name is Josephine Marie, but everyone calls me Grandma Joe. I'm 79 years old, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, where the winter wind cuts right through to your soul. Today I'm going to tell a story I've kept for over 60 years. A story that happened in late 1960 when I was only 18 years old and discovered that the monster doesn't live under the bed. Sometimes it carries the same blood as you and arrives with a suitcase saying it came to take care of the family. Our house was simple but cozy in the East Side neighborhood. One of those wooden houses with a front porch and a long backyard with apple trees, cherry trees, and even a small vegetable garden that my father tended on the rare Sundays when he was sober. The wooden windows that rattled hard in the wind, the floors that creaked announcing whoever was coming, the old coal furnace that stayed lit even in summer. These memories still warm my heart on the coldest days. There were 3 of us, me, my mother Antonia, and my father Sebastian. He worked at the Ford River Rouge plant, left before sunrise, and came back late at night when he came back at all. Many times he went straight to the bar after work, or, as I discovered later, to the clubs on Cass Corridor. My mother took in laundry for the wealthy families in Grosse Pointe. She woke up early, heated water in the big tub in the basement, soaped, scrubbed, rinsed, ironed. Work that consumed her hands and back, but I never heard her complain. My mother was a strong woman, one of those that life kept bending, but never broke. Short, thin, hair always pulled back in a messy bun. Hands red from soap and hot water. Her eyes, her eyes were the most beautiful green I've ever seen, like fresh apple leaves after spring rain. I inherited those eyes, the only beautiful thing I got from her. I helped as I could. Hung clothes on the line, delivered finished orders to the houses of the ladies in Palmer Woods, did housework while she washed. I also studied at night at Northeastern High School. I wanted to be a teacher. A poor girl's dream back then, a diploma, independence, a life different from my mother's. Everything changed on that day, June 22nd, 1960. It was one of those Detroit winter days that hurt your bones. Gray sky, fine sleet that wouldn't stop, that damp cold that gets into every corner of the house. My mother had been sick for several weeks. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away, then fever at night, weakness. Tuberculosis, the doctor had said weeks before. A disease that took many people away back then, especially the poor who didn't have money for proper treatment at Detroit General Hospital. That morning, I woke up to silence. Strange, because even when sick, my mother was always the first to get up, to stoke the furnace, to put water on to heat. But that day, nothing. I went to her room, the door slightly open. "Mom?" Silence. I pushed the door slowly. She was lying on her side, her back to the door, the quilt pulled up to her neck, the way she slept when she was cold. "Mom, it's time for your medicine." Nothing, not a movement. I approached and touched her shoulder. Cold, stiff, a sensation I'll never forget. "Mom?" I turned her slowly and saw what I already knew in my heart. Eyes open, glassy, staring at nothing. Mouth slightly open as if she had tried to say one last thing. Pale skin, with a coloration that was no longer hers. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not at that moment. I stood there, paralyzed, looking at the only person who truly loved me in this world, now gone. The neighbors helped call the doctor, the same one who had diagnosed the tuberculosis. He arrived, examined, confirmed the obvious. Death due to complications from tuberculosis, probably during the early morning hours. I signed papers, answered questions. All automatically, as if it weren't me there, as if I were watching everything from outside my body. The neighbor, Mr. Murphy from Murphy's Corner Store, managed to find my father at Tony's Tavern on Grand River. He arrived hours later, smelling of Pabst Blue Ribbon, red eyes, staggering. "What happened? What happened to Antonia?" "Your wife has passed away, Mr. Sebastian." The doctor explained with that coldness of someone who had seen too much death to be shaken. My father knelt beside the bed. more from the imbalance of drink than from pain. He cried a loud, dramatic cry, beat his chest, pulled his hair, repeated her name, a show that didn't move me. Where was he when she needed to go to the doctor? When there wasn't money for medicine? When she coughed up blood in the early morning hours? The wake was in our house, as was customary. The neighbor women washed and dressed my mother's body in the only good dress she had, a dark navy one she only wore for Sunday Mass at St. Joseph's. They lit candles, covered the mirrors, prepared strong black Maxwell House coffee and Wonder Bread with butter for whoever came to mourn. The neighborhood ladies arrived, my father's colleagues from the Rouge plant, even some clients from Grosse Pointe my mother washed for. The small house filled with people, everyone repeating the same empty phrases. The Lord works in mysterious ways. At least she's not suffering anymore. She was a godly woman. I watched everything quietly in a corner. The tears had finally come, silent, constant, like the sleet outside that gave no respite. It was mid-afternoon when I remembered her belongings. I needed to store them, organize them. That's what was done. I went to the room, opened the nightstand drawer where she kept her personal things. The black beaded rosary she prayed with every night was there, broken in half, as if someone had torn it apart with force. Strange. She took such care of that rosary from St. Alphonsus Church. And then there was that letter, a simple envelope with the thick, poorly written handwriting of my Uncle Augustus, my mother's younger brother. An uncle I barely knew who lived in Grand Rapids and rarely visited. The last time had been at Christmas, 6 months before. I opened the letter, dated 3 days earlier. Antonia, I got your message. Already arranged everything here. I'm arriving Friday night. I know Sebastian won't like it, but now it's time for family. I'm going to help take care of you and the girl. Don't worry anymore. Your brother, Augustus. Friday. It was Friday. He was coming. But my mother hadn't told me anything about calling Uncle Augustus. Why would she do this without telling me? I didn't have time to think more. The living room door opened. The sudden silence caught my attention. I heard his voice before I saw him. Where is my sister? The deep, authoritative voice. A voice that commanded, that didn't ask, that imposed. I put the letter in my apron pocket and returned to the living room. There he was, Uncle Augustus. Tall, strong, black hair slicked back with Brill cream, thick mustache. He wore a brown suit, carried a worn leather suitcase. The eyes, same as my mother's, same as mine, only cold. Always cold. Someone pointed to the casket. He crossed the room, ignoring the greetings, the condolences. He stopped in front of my mother's body. He stood there, looking, in silence. Then he made the sign of the cross, kissed her forehead, and turned around. That's when he saw me. Josephine. It wasn't a question, nor a greeting. It was a statement, like someone saying, "Still here." Uncle Augustus, when did it happen? This morning. Doctor said it was during the night. The tuberculosis. Yes, the tuberculosis. He cut short, dry. Where's your father? I pointed to the backyard, where my father was with some men from the plant, drinking Stroh's beer, receiving pats on the back, already more resigned than mourning. Uncle Augustus went there. I saw through the window their conversation. My father surprised, then irritated. My uncle talking, gesturing. My father shaking his head, disagreeing. Then resigned. Something had been decided, and I wasn't consulted. The next day, after the funeral at Mount Eliot Cemetery, I found out what. Augustus is going to stay living here, my father announced, without looking me in the eyes. To help take care of the house, and you. I don't need anyone to take care of me, Dad. I'm 18 years old. You do need it. I'm your father, I decide. Before I could answer, my uncle entered the kitchen. He had taken off his suit jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves. He seemed bigger inside our small house. We start tomorrow organizing everything. The house is a mess. Doesn't even look like there was a woman living here. The casual cruelty of the words. As if my mother hadn't worked herself to death until the last day. As if our house wasn't clean and tidy, as much as possible. My mother was sick, I replied, anger rising up my neck. He looked at me as if he just now noticed my presence. Right. And who took care of her? By the looks of it, nobody, right? Otherwise she wouldn't have died like that. The accusation fell like a slap. I felt my face burn. The tears came back, but I didn't let them fall. I took care of her. Every day. Dad who... I didn't finish. My father got up from his chair, hand raised, ready to slap. "Watch how you talk, girl." My uncle put his hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Leave it, Sebastian. She's nervous, lost her mother." Then he turned to me. "But learn one thing, girl. This house now has new rules. I'm not your mother to pat your head. You'll have respect or you'll have discipline. You choose." The threat hung in the air. Heavy, real. I ran to my room, the only place that still seemed mine in that house that, in less than 24 hours, had stopped being a refuge to become a prison. Lying in bed, looking at the water-stained ceiling, I understood that my mother's death was just the beginning of my losses. Now I had lost the house, freedom, peace, and in my uncle's eyes that afternoon, I had already seen that he planned to take much more from me. Oh, my dear ones watching this video, I got lost here in memories and almost forgot about you. Have you ever been through something like this? Losing someone and then having your whole life turned upside down? Tell me in the comments below where you're watching this video from and how many children you have. I love knowing who the souls are on the other side of this little screen, sharing a bit of my story. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and give this video a like to make this grandma happy. Now, let's continue. On the first night after the funeral, I stayed awake until late. I heard their conversation in the kitchen. My father and my uncle drinking Old Crow whiskey, talking loud. "Problem is the girl." It was my uncle's voice. "Josephine, what about her? She's at a dangerous age, already thinking she's a woman. Your sister spoiled her, let her run too loose. Is that why you really came? To put her in line?" "I came because Antonia asked me to, before she got worse. She knew she was going to die. She knew you wouldn't be able to handle it. And the girl what? The girl is to blame." "To blame for what, man?" "For Antonia's death, of course. If she wasn't so rebellious, so mouthy, wouldn't have given so much grief. Antonia got sick from worry about that one." I had to bite the pillow not to scream. How dare he? Me, who took care of my mother until her last breath. Who worked, studied, helped at home. Who never gave reason for shame or worry. Don't talk nonsense, Augustus. My father, for the first and only time, defended me. The girl is hardworking, and Antonia died of tuberculosis, not grief. Tuberculosis she caught washing clothes in that freezing basement to support this house, while you spent everything at the track and the bars. Silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping, glass breaking. "I didn't call you here to judge me." "No, but I came anyway. Someone has to put order in this house." The threat hung in the air. Then I heard footsteps. Door slamming. My father leaving, probably to Corkery's tavern, as he always did when things got difficult at home. 3 days after the funeral, I began to understand Uncle Augustus's plan. He woke me up early, pulling the blanket from my bed. "Get up. There's laundry to wash." I rubbed my eyes, confused. "But today is Monday. I have classes in the afternoon and work in the morning at Woolworth's." "No more classes or work. Already talked to the manager at Woolworth's and the school. Now you stay home." "What? You can't do that?" "I can, and I did. Your father agreed. He's the one responsible, not you. You're already 18. It's more than time to learn to take care of a house properly. You'll work here, to pay for your room and board." "But my father..." "Your father doesn't give orders anymore. I'm in charge now." And he was. In 1 week, Uncle Augustus had completely transformed our routine. My father, who was already absent, now barely appeared at home. He slept, had breakfast, and left for the Rouge plant. Sometimes he didn't come back for days. When I complained, my uncle shrugged. Men have needs, and there's no woman of his here anymore. The insinuation disgusted me. The house servant was now me. I washed, ironed, cooked, cleaned. Endless work, without rest, without thanks. If something wasn't perfect, and for Uncle Augustus, it never was, came the punishment. At first it was just shouting. Then came the slaps. The first was when I burned the Campbell's soup. "You don't even know how to do this right!" The slap cracked on my cheek, throwing me against the Kelvinator stove. "Didn't your mother teach you anything, or are you just stupid?" The slaps became shoves, the shoves became punches, the excuses changed, but the violence was constant. Look at this floor, poorly mopped. The shirt is poorly ironed. Took too long to make dinner. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the humiliation, the constant comments. You look like a pig, not even good enough for marriage. Not even your mother could stand it, died to get rid of you. Each phrase a cut to the soul. Each insult a stab to my mother's memory. At night, in my room, I cried quietly into my pillow so he wouldn't hear. I cried for my lost mother, for my absent father, for my interrupted life, for the dreams of being a teacher that seemed increasingly distant. Mom, I whispered in the darkness, help me. But the only answer was the silence of the old house. And sometimes, my uncles snoring in the next room. A month after my mother's death came the worst part. On a very cold December night, I woke up to my bedroom door opening. My uncle's silhouette against the dim light from the hallway. Uncle? Did something happen? It's too cold to sleep alone. The smell of bourbon was strong. He staggered to my bed, sat on the edge. What do you want? Company. His heavy hand touched my knee over the blanket. You're already a woman, aren't you? 18 years old. Your mother at this age had already married. I understood immediately. I froze with fear, with disgust. Uncle, you're not well. Go back to your room. Don't tell me what to do, girl. His hand moved up my leg. You owe me. I'm supporting you, giving you a roof. It's the least you can do. I closed my eyes, thinking quickly. I was alone in that house. My father hadn't come back for 2 days. The neighbors were too far away to hear screams. He moved closer. The smell of bourbon mixed with Lucky Strike cigarettes. It'll be nice, I promise. If you cooperate, that's when something inside me transformed. The scared girl became a cornered wild animal. In one quick movement, I grabbed the water pitcher that was on the nightstand and broke it on his head. The sound of glass breaking. Him falling backward, surprised more than hurt. Blood running down his forehead. You little bitch, he screamed, trying to get up. I'll kill you. But I was already standing, adrenaline taking over. Years of carrying heavy bundles of wet laundry had given me strength he didn't expect. I pushed him with everything against the wall, gaining precious seconds. I ran. Through the hallway, through the kitchen, through the back door. The cold Michigan night received me, the cutting wind on my bare feet. I ran through the yard, jumped the chain-link fence, crossed neighboring lots, without direction, just away, to anywhere that wasn't that house, that wasn't near him. I stopped many blocks later, my lungs burning, my feet bleeding from stones and glass shards on the icy sidewalks. I hid behind a car in the parking lot of A&P grocery store, shaking from cold and fear. What to do now? Where to go? I had no money, no close friends, no more school or work. That's when I remembered Mrs. Helen Kowalski, an old client of my mother's, who was always kind to me. She lived on the other side of the city, in the Hamtramck area, far enough away. And she always said, if you need anything, look for me, Josephine. Need anything. I never imagined it would be needing everything. I walked all night, hours and hours, hiding when I heard cars or saw the few people out in that freezing December night. I arrived at her house at dawn, exhausted, dirty, hurt. I knocked on the door with what remained of my strength. Mrs. Kowalski answered in her flannel robe, gray hair in pin curls, eyes wide when she saw me. Sweet Jesus, Josephine, what happened to you, honey? I opened my mouth to explain, but only a sob came out. I collapsed in her arms, crying like I had never cried before. The tears I had held for a whole month. The pain, the fear, the humiliation, everything overflowing at once. She took me inside, closed the door against the cold. She ran hot water in the bathtub, helped me wash like I was a small child, took care of the cuts on my feet, dressed me in clean clothes from her daughter who had married and moved to Cleveland. She made me hot cocoa and gave me Polish pierogi left over from dinner. Only then, sitting in her warm kitchen with the smell of kielbasa and coffee, could I tell everything. Mrs. Kowalski listened in silence, her eyes filling with tears, her work-worn hand holding mine tightly. Oh, sweetheart, what that monster did to you. I can't go back there. I can't. And you won't. Never again. She held my face in her hands. You stay here, for as long as you need. But what if he comes looking for me? Let him come. This house is mine. I'm a widow, but I have 3 sons who live in the neighborhood. I have neighbors who know what's what. I have the phone number of Officer Kowalski. No relation, but he's a good Polish boy who went to school with my oldest. I want to see that animal try something. The security in her voice was like a warm quilt on a winter night. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt I could breathe. Are you sure, Mrs. Kowalski? Call me Babcia Helen, honey. And yes, I'm absolutely sure. And more. Tomorrow we're going to the Hamtramck police station to report what happened, and then to Northeastern High, so you can go back to school. You're not going to stop being a teacher because of that monster. I cried again, but they were different tears now. Of relief, of gratitude, maybe even a hint of hope. That night, lying in the soft bed in Babcia Helen's spare room, looking through the window at the street lights of Hamtramck glowing through the snow, I thought of my mother. Mom, I whispered, I know it was you who guided me here, who gave me strength to run, who put Babcia Helen in my path. I felt a strange peace, as if she had heard, as if she had answered, yes, daughter, it was. And for the first time since that June morning, I slept without fear, without nightmares, without startling awake. The battle was far from over. There would be confrontations, police reports, tears, anger. My uncle wouldn't give up easily. My father would take sides, probably the wrong one. The whole neighborhood would talk. But that night, lying in that borrowed bed in Hamtramck, I was no longer just a victim. I was a survivor. And that, no one could take away from me anymore. The first days at Babcia Helen's house were like waking up from a nightmare and discovering that reality can be kind. She treated me like the daughter who had moved to Cleveland. She made me hot oatmeal for breakfast when she noticed I had spent the night crying. She put fresh carnations from the corner market in my room and left encouraging notes in Polish and English under my pillow. You are strong, Josephine. Stronger than you know. But the peace didn't last long. On the 3rd morning, the doorbell rang angrily while we were having coffee and listening to Paul Harvey on the radio. Through the kitchen window, I saw the Detroit police car, and my heart froze. Next to it, imposing as always, stood my Uncle Augustus, the cut on his forehead covered by a Band-Aid. Stay here, Babcia Helen ordered, going to answer. From the kitchen I heard everything, my uncle's gruff voice trying to sound concerned. She ran away from home, ma'am. We're desperate. Her father is beside himself with worry. Lie. My father probably hadn't even noticed my absence until Uncle Augustus told him. A minor, he continued, disturbed by her mother's death. She attacked me with a glass pitcher when I tried to stop her from leaving in the middle of the night. I had to get stitches. A minor? Babcia Helen's voice was calm but firm. Josephine is 18 years old, sir. She showed me her birth certificate. Even so, she's family responsibility. And I am her family now. Funny thing, Babcia Helen replied, because just yesterday I was with Officer Kowalski. You know him? Good boy from the parish. Well, we filed a very detailed police report, with photos of the bruises on her back, of the finger marks on her arms, of the cuts on her feet from when she ran barefoot through the streets in December, terrified of you. Silence. I could almost feel my uncle's furious look. That's all lies. She's always been a problem child. Her own mother died of heartbreak because of her. Well, you can explain that to the judge. Officer Kowalski says cases like this are going to start being taken more seriously. Times are changing. The policeman's voice interrupted, sounding uncomfortable. I heard words like complicated situation and downtown and paperwork. Minutes later, Babcia Helen returned to the kitchen, her face serious but determined. They left, but they'll be back. We need to be ready. And they did come back. Not the same day, nor the next, but a week later, when I was already starting to relax, to believe that maybe my uncle had given up. It was Sunday morning. Babcia Helen had gone to early mass at St. Florian's, and I stayed home making pierogi for Sunday dinner. The knock on the door was different this time. Urgent, angry. I looked through the curtain and froze. My father. Alone but clearly drunk even at 9 a.m. I didn't open it. I stood still, hoping he would go away. But the pounding got louder. "Josephine! I know you're in there! Open this damn door!" His voice was slurred, probably drunk on Thunderbird wine. "I'll kick it in if you don't open up." Mrs. Kowalski from next door started peeking through her curtains. I took a deep breath and opened the door, not wanting to cause problems for Babsia Helen in the neighborhood. My father stared at me, bloodshot eyes, 3 days of stubble, reeking of cheap wine and cigarettes. "What kind of shit is this, running away from home, making up lies about my brother-in-law?" "I didn't make up anything, Dad. Your Uncle Augustus said you tried to—" He lowered his voice, suddenly aware of the neighbors watching. "Seduce him. And when he turned you down like a decent man, you attacked him and ran away." The disgust rose in my throat. The complete reversal of truth. The manipulation. "You believe that? Even knowing me, knowing how Mom raised me? I don't know what to believe anymore. Your mother dies, and you can't even stick around a month, abandoning your responsibilities. Now Augustus is talking about going back to Grand Rapids, and who's going to take care of the house, cook, do laundry?" So that was it. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about who would be his unpaid housekeeper. "The house isn't my responsibility, Dad, and I'm not going back there while he's there." "Then don't come back ever, because he ain't leaving. It was your mother's dying wish that he take care of the family." "That's a lie. Mom would never—" "She did. And if you don't want to come back, then you're dead to me too. Dead. You hear me? Dead." He screamed this and stumbled away, leaving on the doorstep not just the smell of wine and failure, but the weight of his final rejection. Dead. To my father, I was now dead. When Babsia Helen came back from Mass, still in her good Sunday coat and hat, I told her what happened. She listened without interrupting, then was quiet for a long time. "Josephine, Jesko, what do you want to do with your life?" "What do you mean?" "Your future, your dreams. What do you want to become?" No one had ever asked me that, not even my mother, who, despite all her love, always assumed my life would be like hers. Hard work, early marriage, children, more hard work until you drop. "I want to finish high school, go to Wayne State University. I want to be a teacher." "Then that's what we're going to make happen." The following Monday, Babsia Helen took me on the bus downtown to re-enroll at Northeastern High. She also got me a part-time job at Kresge's Five and Dime, where her friend Mrs. Nowak was a floor supervisor. In the following weeks, I established a routine, worked after school and weekends at Kresge's, studied every evening at the kitchen table while Babsia Helen did her mending. Life began to have a rhythm, a peace I hadn't experienced since before my mother got sick. But my uncle hadn't given up. In February, 2 months after my escape, he appeared at Kresge's during my shift. He walked in calm as could be, well-dressed in his brown suit, looking at merchandise like any other customer. I froze, recognizing his voice before I saw him asking Mrs. Nowak about men's cologne. He made his way to the section where I was stocking bobby pins and hair ribbons. "Josephine, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I have a proposition. One last offer before I take more serious steps." "What kind of proposition?" "Come back home, just until June when you graduate. Help me settle your mother's affairs, get the house in order, then I'll give you money to start fresh. Maybe even help with college." I looked straight into his eyes. The same green eyes that were so warm in my mother and so cold in him. "Never. I'd rather sleep in the street. That might be exactly what happens to you." His voice was quiet but threatening. "You think that old Polish lady can protect you forever? You think the police care about a runaway girl with no family?" "Mr. Kowalski," I called to the store manager, loud enough for other customers to hear. "This man is bothering me. He's the one I told you about." Mr. Kowalski, a stocky man who'd survived Guadalcanal and didn't scare easy, came over from behind the counter. He looked my uncle up and down. "You bothering my employee, mister?" "I'm talking to my niece. Family business. In my store, she's not your niece. She's my employee, and she's telling you to leave her alone. Look, I don't want any trouble." "Then don't start any. Door's right behind you." For the first time, I saw my uncle backed down. He wasn't used to men who fought back. "This isn't over, Josephine," he muttered, heading toward the exit. "Yes, it is," I called after him. It's been over since the night you tried to rape me. Several customers stopped and stared. My uncle's face went red, but he kept walking. That night I couldn't sleep, his threats echoing in my head. The next day I told Babcia Helen, who immediately called Officer Kowalski. By evening, we had an updated restraining order. My uncle was forbidden to come within 500 feet of me, the store, or Babcia Helen's house, but paper couldn't stop a man bent on revenge. March 1961 came with terrible news. Babcia Helen got a phone call at dinner time, and when she hung up, her face was white as her Sunday tablecloth. "Josephine, honey, your father had an accident." "What kind of accident?" "Car hit him on Jefferson Avenue. He was walking back from Mickey's Tavern, stepped right into traffic. Driver said he never saw him in the dark." Did he die?" "No, but he's in bad shape. Detroit General Hospital." I went to visit even though everyone advised against it. My father was barely recognizable, tubes everywhere, machines beeping, bandages covering half his head, both legs broken, several ribs cracked, and brain swelling. The doctors weren't optimistic. At the hospital room door, I found the last person I wanted to see. My uncle Augustus. "Come to see what you caused." His voice was tired but still bitter. "What I caused? You're the one who drove him to drink more. If you hadn't run away, he wouldn't be like this. He'd be home with his daughter, what was left of his family, not drinking himself to death at Mickey's every night. Always the blame. Always my fault." "You're sick," I whispered. "You get off on hurting people, don't you? What would Mom say if she could see what you've done?" For the first time, I saw something flicker in those cold eyes. Shame? Regret? No. It was pure hatred. "Your mother knew exactly what kind of daughter she had. Ungrateful, selfish. In her last weeks, she told me she was worried about what would happen to you, that you needed a firm hand." "You're lying," I shouted, loud enough that a nurse looked in. "My mother loved me. She loved you like you love a stray dog, because she had to. But she trusted me to do what was right. That's why she wrote to me before she died." February 1961 brought news of my father's death. He never woke up from the coma. The funeral was even smaller than my mother's. A few guys from the Rouge plant, some neighbors, Babcia Helen and me. Uncle Augustus handled all the arrangements, acting like he was the only family left. After the cemetery, he cornered me by the cars. "It's finished now, Josephine. Your father's dead. The house is mine." "What do you mean, yours?" "Your father signed it over to me before the accident. Got himself so deep in debt, had to sell. I have all the papers, all legal and proper." "That's impossible." "I've got the deed. Recorded at the courthouse. Your childhood home belongs to me now." I couldn't believe it, but the next week I checked at the Wayne County Courthouse. It was true. Somehow, my uncle had gotten my drunken father to sign over the house, probably for a bottle of whiskey and empty promises. When I told Babcia Helen, she was furious. She called her sons, called Officer Kowalski, even called a lawyer from the parish. But everyone said the same thing. If the sale was properly witnessed and recorded, there wasn't much we could do. My uncle had won. He'd taken everything, the house, the memories, every stick of furniture my mother had loved, or so he thought. Because the one thing he couldn't take was my determination to make something of myself. Spring 1961 brought an unexpected gift. There was a small life insurance policy my father had through the UAW, with me listed as beneficiary. It wasn't much, $500, but it was enough for a new beginning. "See?" Babcia Helen said when the check arrived. "Your mama was looking out for you even then. She probably made sure your name was on that policy years ago, knowing someday you might need it." With that money, I rented a tiny room in a boarding house for working girls near Wayne State University. Babcia Helen wanted me to stay with her, but I knew I needed to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. The room was barely bigger than a closet, just a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out on the alley behind Angelo's Coney Island restaurant. But it was mine. The first space that truly belonged to me since my mother died. Spring turned to summer, and I graduated from Northeastern High School. No family there to see me walk across that stage, just Babcia Helen in her best dress, crying with pride as I received my diploma. That night, we celebrated with pierogi and Stroh's beer at her kitchen table. "Your mama would be so proud," she kept saying. So proud of her girl. In fall 1961, I started classes at Wayne State University, studying to become a teacher. It was harder than I'd imagined. Not just the coursework, but being surrounded by kids from families with money. Kids who'd never worked a day in their lives, who talked casually about summer vacations at Mackinac Island and new Chevrolets. I felt the divide every day. While they wore the latest fashions from Hudson's department store, I wore the same 3 dresses Babcia Helen had sewn for me. While they complained about their allowances, I counted every penny, eating crackers and peanut butter for dinner so I could afford textbooks. But I belonged there. Every A on a test, every professor's nod of approval, every excellent work, Miss Sebastian, written in red ink on my papers, proved it. I wasn't just the daughter of a drunk and a laundress anymore. I was Josephine Sebastian, future teacher, future college graduate. October brought an unexpected encounter. I was studying in the university library when a familiar voice made me look up. "Josephine? Josephine Sebastian?" It was Robert Mitchell, a boy I'd known at Northeastern High. He'd been in my English class senior year. Smart, kind, one of the few kids who'd been nice to me even though I was obviously poor. "Robert, what are you doing here?" "Engineering program. What about you?" "Education. I'm going to be a teacher." We started talking, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. He walked me to the bus stop afterward, and we made plans to study together the following week. Robert became my first real friend at Wayne State. He understood what it was like to work for everything. His father had died in Korea, and his mother cleaned offices downtown to pay for his schooling. We studied together, grabbed coffee at the student union when we could afford it, and slowly, carefully, began to mean something to each other. "You want to change the world," he told me one snowy December evening as we walked across campus. "I can see it in your eyes when you talk about teaching." "Someone changed mine," I said, thinking of Babcia Helen, of my mother, of all the people who'd shown me kindness when I needed it most. Maybe I can pass it on. Winter 1962 brought news that shook me to my core. Babcia Helen called me at the boarding house on a Tuesday night, her voice shaking. "Josephine, honey, I have to tell you something. Your uncle, he's dead." I sat down hard on my narrow bed. "What happened?" "Heart attack. Found him in that house of yours. Your mama's house. Been dead 2 days before the mailman noticed the newspapers piling up." I should have felt something. Relief, maybe, or closure. Instead, I felt nothing at all. "There's something else," Babcia Helen continued. "He left a will. The house, he left it back to you. The house, the place where I'd been born, where my mother had lived and died, where I'd endured the worst months of my life. It was mine again." The next weekend, I took the bus back to the old neighborhood for the first time in over a year. The house looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier. The paint was peeling, the front porch sagged, and the yard was full of weeds. But when I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, something remarkable happened. Instead of the fear and anger I expected, I felt peace. The house remembered love, not just pain. It remembered my mother singing while she cooked, remembered her reading to me by lamplight, remembered all the ordinary moments of happiness that had happened within these walls. In the bedroom that had been my mother's, I found a small wooden box hidden behind the radiator, her jewelry box. Inside was the rosary Uncle Augustus had broken, now carefully repaired with black thread. And underneath it, a note in his handwriting. "What I broke, I tried to fix. I'm sorry for what I did to you. Your mother was a saint and I failed her. The house is yours. Make it a home again. Augustus." I sat on the floor of that empty room and cried, not from sadness or anger, but from a kind of release I'd never felt before. The circle was closing, not with forgiveness. Some things go beyond forgiveness, but with something like understanding. My uncle had been a broken man who tried to break me, but I hadn't broken. I'd bent, I'd survived, and now I was becoming something he could never have imagined, someone strong enough to transform pain into purpose. Spring 1962 brought major changes. I moved back into the house, spending my weekends painting walls and planting flowers in my mother's old garden. Robert helped me, and our friendship deepened into something more. By summer, we were talking about marriage, not the desperate kind of marriage my mother had made, but a partnership between equals. Robert respected my dreams, supported my studies, and never once suggested I should give up teaching to become a housewife. We married in a simple ceremony at St. Alphonsus Church in August 1963, with Babcia Helen as my matron of honor and Robert's best friend from engineering school as his best man. No family on my side except my chosen family, Babcia Helen, Officer Kowalski, and his wife, Mrs. Nowak from Kresges, and a handful of neighbors who'd known my mother. But the church was full. Half of my education classes showed up, professors included. It turned out I'd made more friends than I realized. After the ceremony, we had a reception in the parish hall, Polish sausage and wedding cake, the Polish Women's Club playing accordion music, and dancing until midnight. It wasn't fancy, but it was joyful. "Your mama's watching," Babcia Helen whispered to me during the mother-daughter dance we'd planned for her instead. "She's so happy for you, Kochani." Robert and I moved into my childhood home, but we made it ours. We painted every room, refinished the floors, planted vegetables where my father's empty beer bottles used to litter the backyard. We turned it from a place haunted by pain into a place filled with hope. In 1964, I graduated from Wayne State with my teaching degree. The ceremony was at Masonic Temple Theater downtown, and I wore my mother's pearl necklace, the only piece of jewelry she'd owned that my uncle hadn't sold. Robert, Babcia Helen, and several of my professors were in the audience when I walked across that stage. As I shook the dean's hand and received my diploma, I thought about that terrified 18-year-old girl who'd run barefoot through Detroit streets 4 years earlier. She'd made it. We'd made it. My first teaching job was at Corktown Elementary, in one of Detroit's poorest neighborhoods. 32 kids in my third-grade class, most of them from homes like the one I'd grown up in. Fathers who worked at the plants when there was work, mothers who cleaned houses or took in laundry, families doing their best with very little. I looked at those children on the first day of school and saw myself in every face. The shy ones who flinched when adults raised their voices. The angry ones who acted out because they didn't know how else to express their pain. The hungry ones who hoarded their free lunch like it might be their last meal. "My name is Mrs. Mitchell," I told them, "and I'm here because I believe every single one of you is capable of amazing things." One little girl in the front row, Maria Gonzalez, raised her hand tentatively. "Yes, Maria? My mama says teachers don't really care about kids like us." I knelt down, so I was at her eye level. "Your mama's had some bad experiences with teachers, hasn't she? Well, I'm different. I grew up in a house a lot like yours, and I'm going to prove to you that kids like us can do anything we set our minds to." And I did prove it. Over the next few years, I watched those children blossom. Marcus, who'd been written off as slow, discovered he was actually incredibly bright once someone took time to understand his learning differences. Patricia, who came to school dirty and often hungry, became one of the best readers in the class once I started keeping granola bars in my desk and helped her family connect with social services. By 1967, I was teaching 5th grade and had been asked to mentor new teachers. The civil rights movement was changing everything, including education, and there was a push to get more teachers who understood the reality of poor children's lives. I started speaking at Wayne State education classes, sharing my story. Not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough to help future teachers understand that their students weren't just names on a roster. They were children with complex lives, children who might be dealing with things no child should have to face. "The most important thing you can do," I told those student teachers, "is see each child as a whole person. Not just their test scores, not just their behavior problems, but who they really are underneath it all." 1968 brought riots to Detroit, and our neighborhood was right in the middle of it. Robert and I watched from our front porch as smoke rose from the buildings on Grand River Avenue. The city I loved was tearing itself apart, and I understood why. Too many people had been pushed too far for too long. Too many children, like the ones I taught, had grown up with no hope, no opportunities, no reason to believe things would ever get better. When school started again in the fall, I could see the trauma in my students' faces. Some had lost their homes in the fires. Others had watched their fathers get arrested or beaten by police. All of them were scared. "Who wants to talk about what happened this summer?" I asked on the first day. Every hand went up. We spent weeks processing what they'd experienced, drawing pictures, writing stories, talking through their fears. I brought in books about other times in history when people had fought for justice, helping them understand they weren't alone in their anger or their hope for something better. By November, something beautiful was happening in our classroom. These children who'd been traumatized were starting to see themselves as part of something bigger, part of a long story of people fighting for fairness, people who refused to give up even when things looked hopeless. "Mrs. Mitchell," 8-year-old Damon asked one day, "were you ever scared like us?" I looked at his serious little face and made a decision. "Yes, Damon. When I was about your age, some very scary things happened to me. But you know what? The scary things didn't get to decide what happened to my life. I got to decide, and so do you." 1969 brought personal joy. Robert and I welcomed our daughter, Antonia Rose Mitchell. Named after my mother, she was born on a sunny May morning and came into the world with the same green eyes that ran in our family. Holding her for the first time, I made the same promise I'd made to my students. "You get to decide what happens in your life, little one. And I'm going to make sure you know you can choose anything." The 1970s brought new challenges and opportunities. I became a principal, then a district administrator, always focusing on schools in the poorest neighborhoods. I developed programs for children who'd experienced trauma, training teachers to recognize the signs and respond with compassion rather than punishment. In 1975, I started the Antonia Sebastian Foundation, named after my mother, providing scholarships and support services for children from troubled homes who showed academic promise. Our first scholarship recipient was Maria Gonzalez, that little girl who'd questioned whether teachers really cared. She became a teacher herself, and eventually took over one of our programs. As the years went by, I kept in touch with hundreds of former students. Marcus became an engineer. Patricia became a social worker. Damon became a doctor. Not all of them made it. Some fell victim to drugs, violence, or despair. But enough succeeded to prove that where you start doesn't have to determine where you finish. In 1980, Robert and I celebrated our daughter's high school graduation. Antonia Rose was valedictorian, bound for the University of Michigan on a full scholarship to study law. As I watched her give her graduation speech about justice and equality, I thought about how far we'd all come. "Some people think success is about forgetting where you came from," she said. "But I think real success is about remembering where you came from and using that knowledge to help others rise up too." March 1965 marked the true turning point. One of the mothers didn't show up to pick up her child after class. Sebastian, a 6-year-old boy, was crying silently in the corner of the classroom while I tried to figure out what had happened. After much insistence, he told me, "The man who lives with Mama hit her. She fell on the floor and didn't get up." My blood ran cold. I asked Mrs. Teresa, the lunch lady, to stay with the remaining children and took Sebastian with me. The address was in one of the poorest parts of the neighborhood, an alley of wooden houses crammed together. We found his mother, Mrs. Jurema, sitting on the doorstep, her face swollen, dried blood at the corner of her mouth, her eyes empty like someone who had given up fighting. "Sorry I didn't come get the boy, teacher," she mumbled. I wasn't in any condition. I went home that night with the image of Mrs. Jurema burned in my mind. Throughout the early morning hours, I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about my mother, my uncle, all the Juremas in the world who didn't have a Babsia Helen to turn to. I have to do something, I decided. I can't just teach children to read and ignore the rest. The next day, I went to talk to Mrs. Patterson, now director of the project that had expanded to 3 different neighborhoods. "I want to create a support group for women," I explained. "Mothers of our students mainly. A place where they can talk about their problems, receive guidance, build a protection network." Mrs. Patterson looked at me for a long time, evaluating not the idea, but the risks. "You know that the authorities are watching any kind of popular organization, right? They could interpret this as subversive activity. We'll call it a mother's club then," I suggested. "Focused on crafts, cooking, things like that. What we do beyond that stays between us." She smiled, that smile that never quite reached her eyes since the political tensions had started. "You're smart, Josephine, and brave. But be careful. A lot of good people are disappearing for much less." April 1965, the Mothers Club officially began. 15 women at the first meeting, sitting in a circle in the schoolroom after classes. We really did start with crafts, crocheting mainly. I barely knew how to make a basic stitch, but Babsha Helen, who had become a regular volunteer, was a master. While hands worked, tongues loosened. Stories began to emerge. Mrs. Jurema wasn't an isolated case. Practically all of them had stories of violence, abuse, abandonment. The difference was, they had never talked about it before. They had never realized they weren't alone. "I thought it only happened to me," confessed one. "That I did something wrong. My mother said women have to endure," said another. "That it's part of marriage." "And where do we go if we leave home?" asked a third. "With small children, no money, no family?" It was the million-dollar question. The same one I had asked myself so many times. "We help each other," I replied simply. "Like we're doing now." May and June 1965 saw the Mothers Club grow. 30, then 40 women. Some came from other neighborhoods, having heard through friends. The crafts produced began to be sold at fairs, generating a small income that went to a common fund. "Emergency money," we explained, "for anyone who needs to leave home quickly." We began to establish a network of safe houses, women who had a spare room or who could accommodate someone on the couch for a few nights. We got the discreet support of 2 lawyers, friends of Dr. Peterson, who advised on separations, child custody, and complaints. July 1965 brought the first big test. Need, one of the quietest women in the group, showed up at my house in the middle of the night, her face so beaten that I could barely recognize her. With her, 3 small children, only with the clothes on their backs. "He said he was going to kill me," she whispered. And I believed him. I brought everyone inside and activated our network. In less than an hour, we had arranged a safe place for Nide and the children, in another neighborhood, far enough away. The next day, one of the volunteer lawyers was already preparing documents for a protective order. Something rare to get at that time, but not impossible. When Nade's husband showed up in the neighborhood looking for her, he found a wall of silence. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had seen anything. August brought me unexpected recognition. A women's magazine from Michigan published an article about our Mothers Club, highlighting the crafts and adult literacy classes we had started offering for the women. "Women Helping Women," read the headline. The article, fortunately, didn't mention anything about cases of violence or the support network we had created. It presented the project as an educational and income-generating initiative, which it also was, but only part of the story. The visibility, however, brought risks. September began with an unwanted visit. FBI agents appeared at the school wanting information about the women's group I coordinated. "It's just a craft club," I explained, showing the crocheted tablecloths, rugs, rag dolls, and literacy classes for adults. Part of the national government program, in fact. They searched the room, flipped through notebooks, looked suspiciously at the posters on the walls, children's drawings, simple phrases encouraging reading. "We received reports of subversive activities," one of them finally said. "Of meetings to badmouth the government." I kept calm, although my heart was beating irregularly. "Feel free to attend any of our meetings, Agent. They're on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Bring your wife if you want. We always need more hands to finish the Christmas orders." It was a bluff, of course. If he showed up, we would actually have to have a meeting about crocheting. But something told me that a federal agent wouldn't waste his time with a group of poor women doing handicrafts. I was right. They left, still suspicious, but without proof of any subversive activity. However, the message was clear. We were being watched. "We have to be even more careful," I warned the women at the next meeting. "No political comments, nothing about talking about activities outside here. If anyone asks, it's just a craft and literacy club." October 1965 marked 1 year since I started the project in the neighborhood and brought a new dimension to our work. Antonio, that boy who reminded me so much of myself, showed up at school with a black eye. Again. "I thought your father had stopped hitting you," I commented while taking care of the injury. "And he had," he replied, his voice low. "For a while. But then he lost his job, started drinking again. The family cycle of violence, the same one that had destroyed my family. The same one I saw repeating in so many houses in the neighborhood. Antonio, why don't you bring your father to talk to me? He won't come, teacher. Says school is women's business. Tell him we have a carpentry course on Saturdays for fathers, with possibility of employment afterward. It was a lie, of course. But I knew I needed bait to attract men like Antonio's father. And do we really have it, teacher? His eyes lit up with hope. We're going to, I promised. Somehow. That night, I called an emergency meeting with Mrs. Patterson, Babsha Helen, and some other project supporters. We need to involve the men, I explained. Violence won't stop while we only work with women and children. We have to break the cycle at its source. And how do you intend to do that? Mrs. Patterson seemed skeptical. Violent men aren't just going to show up for a lecture on how not to hit their wives. That's why we need another approach. Something that attracts them for other reasons. Professional courses, for example. Adult literacy focused on men. While they learn a trade or to read, we can work on other values. It wasn't easy to convince everyone. Some thought it was too dangerous to bring these men close to our work. Others doubted we could change such ingrained behaviors. Look at Antonio, I argued. 2 years ago, he was a scared boy who barely spoke. Today, he's one of the best students, confident, full of dreams. If we can transform children, why not try with adults? November brought us an unexpected ally. John, a former carpenter who had lost his right arm in a work accident, was on the waiting list for adult literacy. I can't work with wood anymore, he explained when he came to register. But I can teach. I still have all the tools. And I know there are a lot of kids out there who need to learn a trade. It was exactly what we needed. John not only knew carpentry, he had respect in the community. He was a hard man, yes, the type who didn't show feelings easily, but no one had ever seen him drunk or knew of him hitting his wife or children. How much do you charge to teach classes on Saturdays? I asked directly. He seemed surprised. Don't need to pay, teacher. You're going to teach me to read for free, aren't you? One hand washes the other. December 1965 marked the official beginning of carpentry classes. 10 men on the first Saturday, including Antonio's father. The distrust was palpable. Rough men, used to solving everything with force, now sitting on school benches, waiting for instructions. John was perfect for the role. He spoke their language, had no patience for complaints. Lost your job. Everyone here has lost something. I lost an arm. So what? Life goes on. Now pay attention, because I'm going to teach you how to measure twice before cutting. Between carpentry instructions, John would insert other lessons, almost without them noticing. Wood is like a child. If you want it to turn out right, you need patience, not force. Hit it with too much anger. You ruin the whole piece. January 1966 arrived, and with it the expansion of our work. Besides the Mothers Club and carpentry classes, we now had a youth group. Teenagers from the neighborhood who had already gone through our school and wanted to stay connected. We taught leadership, citizenship, always disguised as recreational or educational activities so as not to attract unwanted attention. And it worked. The small community we were building was beginning to show results. Women more confident and economically independent. Men finding other paths besides violence. Children growing up with the certainty that they could dream of a different future. Of course it wasn't perfect. There were relapses, dropouts, failures. Some cases were so serious that all we could do was help the woman escape, start over somewhere else. Some men were so rooted in violence that not even 100 carpentry classes would change their attitudes. But for every defeat, we had 2 victories. Small ones, sometimes almost imperceptible, but victories nonetheless. February 1966 marked another important step. Antonio, now almost 11 years old, was selected for a full scholarship at a private school in Detroit, a new program that sought talents in underserved communities. I wouldn't have made it without you, he told me when he came to share the news. Before studying here, I thought people like me couldn't dream very high. People like you can dream about anything, I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. And besides dreaming, you can achieve it. Look at me. I grew up in a house not much different from yours, and today I'm a teacher, project director. That's why I believed. He smiled. Because you showed me it was possible. Those words stayed with me for a long time. A cycle of trauma had been broken. A cycle of possibilities had been opened. March brought me a surprise. During a Mothers Club meeting, a woman I had never seen before appeared. She was older than most, well-dressed, clearly not from the neighborhood. "Sorry to show up without warning," she introduced herself. "My name is Helena. I'm a social worker and heard about the work you're doing here." I was immediately alert. In the times we were living, any official person could represent problems. "It's just a craft club," I automatically replied. "And literacy classes." She smiled, understanding. "Don't worry, I'm not here on business, at least not officially. I'm here because I want to help. I have contacts in assistance agencies, access to resources you might not have." Still suspicious, I invited her for a private conversation after the meeting. For more than an hour, Helena told me about her work, about other initiatives similar to ours in different parts of the state, about the difficulties of doing this type of work in such repressive times. "You're doing something extraordinary here," she concluded, "but you could do even more with some structured support." "What kind of support?" "Adequate training to identify serious cases of abuse, connections with safe shelters when the situation is life-threatening, specialized legal guidance, maybe even international help." It was tempting, extremely tempting, but also risky. "How do I know I can trust you?" I asked directly. She wasn't offended by the question. On the contrary, she seemed to approve of my caution. "You don't. Just like I don't know if I can trust you. We'll have to build that trust gradually. Start by checking my credentials, talk to other people who work with me. Then we decide on next steps." That's what I did. Over the following weeks, I discreetly verified Helena's background. I discovered that she really was who she said she was, and more. She had connections with international organizations that supported grassroots work in the United States, especially those focused on women's and children's rights. April 1966 marked the beginning of a new phase. With Helena's help, we began to better structure our work. We received specific training to deal with cases of violence. We established more efficient security protocols. We expanded our support network to include health professionals, specialized lawyers, even some trusted police officers who could intervene in emergency situations. Most importantly, we were no longer alone. We were part of a larger network, connected to other similar projects in different parts of the country. May 1966 brought me an invitation I never expected to receive. Helena wanted me to participate in an international meeting on women's rights that would take place in Toronto. "You would be a perfect representative," she argued. "You know the reality in practice, you have results to show." "But I've never even left Michigan," I protested. "I don't speak other languages. I don't have appropriate clothes. I wouldn't know how to behave at such an event." "All of that can be resolved. What's important is your experience, your voice." I debated with myself for days. The opportunity was unique, but the fear was real. Not just the normal fear of facing an unknown situation, but the specific fear of those times, leaving the country, participating in an event that could be seen as subversive, leaving traces that authorities could follow. In the end, determination won over fear. I accepted the invitation. June and July were of intense preparation. Helena helped me with documentation, with basic notions of French, with tips on how to behave in different situations. Babsia Helen lent me a suitcase. Mrs. Patterson reorganized schedules so I could be absent for 2 weeks. The Mothers Club took up a collection and gave me a simple but elegant suit. "To represent us properly," they said. August 1966 was when I finally boarded for Toronto. I'll never forget that trip. The fear when passing through immigration, fearing that at any moment someone would stop me, discover the true purpose of the trip. The admiration at seeing such a large and cosmopolitan city. The nervousness when entering the hotel where the meeting would take place, surrounded by sophisticated, educated women from different parts of the world. "I don't belong in this place," I thought more than once. "I'm just a neighborhood teacher, daughter of a laundress and factory worker." But then the work sessions began, and I realized that, despite the differences in origin, education, resources, everyone there shared the same objective: to build a world where women and children could live without fear, with dignity, with opportunities. When my turn came to speak, to share the work we were doing in Detroit, the initial nervousness gave way to passion. I talked about the women in the Mothers Club, about the men in carpentry classes, about the children who were growing up with new models and possibilities. I talked about Antonio, about Nade, about so many other cases of transformation we had witnessed. I also talked about the difficulties, the risks, the failures. When I finished, I was surprised by enthusiastic applause. Women I admired, with academic training, years of experience in international organizations, were applauding my work. "Your project is exactly the type of initiative we need to multiply," said a UN representative. "Grassroots work, connected to local reality, done by people who truly know the problems." It was a moment of validation I never expected to experience. The girl who fled from her abusive uncle on a winter night, barefoot and desperate, was now being internationally recognized for her work. Reconstruction and Justice, A New Life After Trauma. September 1966 marked my return to Detroit, transformed by the experience in Toronto. I came back not only with new ideas and contacts, but with renewed conviction that we were on the right path. More importantly, I came back with resources. The project had been selected to receive financial support from an international foundation, as long as we maintained a discrete profile and continued formally as an educational project. The following years were of careful expansion: 1967, 1968, 1969. Each year brought new challenges and achievements. We opened new centers in other neighborhoods. We expanded activities to include professional courses for women, not just crafts. We established partnerships with schools and companies willing to give opportunities to our students. It was ant work, slow, constant, almost invisible to those looking from the outside, but transformative for those involved. 1970 marked a special moment. Antonio, that boy who reminded me so much of myself, passed the entrance exam for engineering at Wayne State University. First in his family to enter university. "I came to invite you to my high school graduation," he said proudly. "Without you, none of this would have happened." "It would have happened," I contested. "You had everything inside you. You just needed someone who believed, like Babsia Helen believed in me." It was true. If it hadn't been for Babsia Helen, that fateful dawn, who knows where I would be? What would my life be like? Would I have survived my uncle? Would I have found a path beyond trauma? The early 70s was a dark period in America. Political tensions were intensifying. Projects like ours lived under constant threat. We learned to be even more careful, to disguise our work under layers of apparently harmless activities. In 1972, I received an invitation I never imagined, to teach at the College of Education in the night course. Professor Patterson, who now coordinated the department, argued that my practical experience would be valuable for future educators. "But I don't have university training," I protested. "Just the normal course." "You have knowledge that can't be learned from college textbooks," she replied. "And besides, what's stopping you from taking pedagogy while teaching? I'm sure we could arrange something special." That's how, at 30 years old, I simultaneously became a university professor and undergraduate student. The poor girl from the East Side now entered through the front door of the university that once seemed an impossible dream. My first class was terrifying. The room full of students, many younger than me, all expecting to be impressed by some great pedagogical theory. "My name is Josephine Marie," I began, my voice firmer than I felt. "And I'm here to talk about education that transforms, not just minds, but lives." In the following years, I divided my time between the university and the neighborhood project, which continued to grow despite difficulties. At college, I trained new educators. In communities, I applied in practice what I taught in theory. University students began doing internships at our community centers. A new generation of teachers was being formed with a different vision of education, not as content transmission, but as a tool for social transformation. 1975 was marked by a reunion I never expected. I was teaching at college when I noticed a familiar face among the older students. Carlos, my first boyfriend, who had gone to Chicago 12 years before. After class, he waited for me. "Josephine, I don't know if you remember me." Of course I remember Carlos. How could I not? He smiled, more mature, but with the same kind look as before. "I came back to Detroit 2 months ago, divorced, with 2 daughters. I'm starting life over, including studies. We had coffee that day, talked about the paths our lives had taken. He had married, built a successful career as an engineer, but the marriage hadn't worked out. And you? Did you marry? Have children? No, I replied. I think I never found time for that. Or maybe it was never my priority. It was true. Between work and communities, studies, and then teaching, romantic relationships always took a back seat. I had some boyfriends over the years, but nothing that lasted or was deep enough to make me consider marriage. Your students are your children, Carlos commented. Thousands of them over the years. That was also true. In a way, each child, teenager, or adult who went through our project took a piece of me with them, and I carried a piece of each of them. Carlos and I began to meet regularly. Friendship that slowly evolved into something more, different from the juvenile romance of before, more mature, more conscious, based on choice and not just emotion. In 1976, at 34 years old, I did something I never imagined I would do. I got married. A simple ceremony at City Hall with a celebration afterward at the neighborhood school, full of students, mothers, fathers, teachers, the entire community that had become my family. Babsha Helen, now a lady of almost 80 years, cried with emotion. Your mother would be so proud, Josephine, of everything you built, everything you are. The following years brought new challenges and joys. Carlos became an integral part of our work, using his engineering skills to improve the facilities of community schools, to teach construction to young people in the neighborhood, to design safer and more accessible housing. In 1978, at 36 years old, I experienced another transformation I never imagined. Motherhood. Our daughter Antonia, named in honor of my mother, was born on a spring morning, bringing a new type of love to my life. I never thought it would be possible to love someone like this, I confessed to Carlos as we watched our daughter sleep. It's like my heart suddenly expanded. And to think we almost didn't find each other again, he commented, holding my hand. Life has strange paths, Josephine. Strange indeed. Who would have imagined that that terrified girl, running barefoot through Detroit's cold night in 1960, would one day be there, respected teacher, beloved wife, mother of a healthy child? Pain had been transformed into strength, trauma into purpose, survival into flourishing. The 80s brought the country's redemocratization and the expansion of our work. We officially founded the Renaissance Institute, bringing together all the neighborhood centers. We no longer needed to hide under the disguise of Mother's Club. We could openly declare our mission to combat domestic violence and transform lives through education. Antonio, that scared boy who reminded me so much of myself, became an engineer and teacher. In 1985, he designed and built the Institute's own headquarters in the heart of Corktown, a 2-story building with classrooms, offices, and community spaces. At the entrance, a simple plaque, for all women and children who had the courage to start over. The 90s brought new challenges, growing urban violence, drug trafficking in communities, children facing not only domestic violence, but also harassment from organized crime. We adapted our work, creating specific programs for at-risk adolescents and establishing partnerships with sports and cultural projects. In 1995, upon completing 30 years of work, I was surprised by a celebration with hundreds of people representing different phases of my journey. Antonio gave an emotional speech. Exactly 30 years ago, a young teacher looked at a scared boy and saw not just what he was, but what he could become. Today, hundreds of us are here because she did the same for each one. The 2000s brought a new role, grandmother. Antonia got married and had 2 children, Pedro and Clara. Seeing my grandchildren growing up in a safe environment, loved and respected, gave me a joy that words cannot describe. It was the final proof that the cycle had been broken. In 2005, I received the title of Honorary Citizen of Detroit for services rendered to the community. In the same year, the Renaissance Institute was recognized by the UN as a model community initiative to combat violence against women and children. Carlos passed away in 2010 after a brief battle with cancer. His departure left an enormous void, but also deep gratitude for the years we shared. He had been my safe harbor, my mission companion, the man who showed me that not everyone is like my father or uncle, that there are men capable of loving with respect, kindness, and admiration. I continued working at the Institute until 2015, when I finally retired from coordination. But I never stopped being present, advising, sharing stories with new generations of educators and social workers. Today, at 79 years old, I look back and see a life that, despite starting with so much suffering, was incredibly full. With each woman who managed to free herself from an abusive relationship, with each child who found a different path from violence, with each family that healed, a little piece of my own trauma also healed. I won't say I forgot or completely overcame what I lived through. Some wounds leave permanent scars. Occasionally, I still wake up from some nightmare, still get startled by sudden noises, still feel that cold in my stomach when I see news about abuse. But I learned that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by what we do with it. My uncle tried to destroy me, but without meaning to, he planted the seed of a strength I didn't even know I had. A strength that allowed me not only to survive, but to extend my hand to other women and children, saying, "Come, there's also a way out for you. There's also a life possible on the other side of pain." My dear ones who made it this far in this story, first I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this old lady share such difficult memories. You know, sharing this story after so many years isn't easy, but I feel it might help someone who's going through something similar right now. If you're watching and identified with any part of my story, I want you to know, you are not alone. You have strength inside you that you might not even know yet. And yes, there is a better tomorrow possible. Tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and how many children you have. I love getting to know who's on the other side of the screen, learning about your families. And if you can, please give this video a like and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales to follow other life stories and tales of overcoming that we share here. I always remember that saying my mother used to repeat, "After the storm comes the calm." At the time, I thought it was just another one of those proverbs that old people like to repeat. Today, I know it's true. The storm may last longer than we'd like, may be more violent than we imagined we could endure, but it passes. And on the other side, there is light. With love, from a grandmother who learned that the greatest revenge is living well, Josephine Marie.